Melanie Stansbury didn't walk into that hearing to make noise. She walked in to expose the silence. The kind of silence that protects the powerful, buries the truth, and leaves survivors fighting a battle they should have never faced alone. And the moment she opened her mouth, the entire room felt it. This wasn't politics. This wasn't theater. This was a warning. The Epstein files have finally cracked open, and what's inside could change everything. She starts with a message that immediately cuts through decades of excuses. Justice isn't partisan.
Now recognizes, we got a number here. Representative Stansbury. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to testify here in the Judiciary Committee. It's an honor to be here to discuss a case that is as serious as it is urgent, and that is the ongoing congressional inquiry into the Jeffrey Epstein case and the failures of the criminal justice system to hold powerful individuals accountable. I want to acknowledge that this committee has taken some significant steps to advance the discharge petition demanding that the administration release the files, and I want to bring some additional materials here today from the Oversight Committee on which I serve, because so many of the issues at play in this case are within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, including the miscarriage of justice that was conducted within the courts, the Department of Justice, law enforcement agencies that failed survivors for decades. So let me begin with this. This is not a partisan issue. Sexual violence is not a partisan issue. Justice for survivors is not a partisan issue. And the pursuit of truth, transparency, and accountability is not a partisan issue. It is essential to restoring trust in our institutions, especially when powerful individuals, whoever they are, have engaged in criminal misconduct and escaped scrutiny and prosecution. The Oversight Committee's work is focused on 3 central questions. What powerful individuals were engaged in criminal behavior? Why did the justice system repeatedly fail women and girls who were groomed, raped, trafficked, and abused? And were individuals with significant influence shielded from proper investigation and accountability? And how do we pursue justice today? Questions that are surely within the clear jurisdiction and interest of this committee. In recent weeks, pursuant to a subpoena, the Oversight Committee has received tens of thousands of documents from the Epstein estate, including more than 1,600 references to the current president. These include emails, correspondence, financial records, litigation documents, and statements attributed to Epstein himself. I want to be clear, these documents contain allegations including sworn statements that must be evaluated through a full, transparent, investigative lens and process. And this is precisely why releasing the full, unredacted Epstein files is essential, and why this public inquiry is also essential. Among the materials I will reference are a sexual assault case in which Donald Trump appears to have been subpoenaed, served, and deposed, sworn statements involving a then 16-year-old who was recruited at Mar-a-Lago, who alleged that she was groomed and assaulted by Epstein and others, including those with significant global influence, emails and correspondence in which Epstein states that Trump knew about the girls and that minors were being recruited from Mar-a-Lago, that Trump was present at Epstein's residence on numerous occasions, and that Epstein possessed photographs of Trump with young girls, and that Trump was, quote, the dog that hadn't barked, a phrase that Epstein used to suggest Trump's potential silence to police. The documents also reference financial transfers between Epstein and Trump, discussion of Trump's business affairs, and concerns about potential money laundering through real estate transactions, all matters that may or may not have criminal significance and clearly warrant investigation. Additionally, we have documents from the Epstein estate in which Epstein himself assessed that he faced a mandatory minimum of at least 10 years in prison, yet the Justice Department declined to prosecute him under federal law despite recommendations from his own line prosecutor. And these statements appear to directly conflict with sworn testimony that the Oversight Committee received from U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta just a few months ago, when he claimed that credible evidence to pursue federal charges was not there. Together, these materials are a substantial body of evidence, and it is evidence that the American people deserve and demand to see. Justice matters because those who abused, enabled, financed, and protected this criminal enterprise must face the truth and must face consequences. And transparency is essential for healing and restoring confidence in the rule of the law, and it is essential because Congress has a responsibility to ensure that our justice system protects victims, not perpetrators. And that includes strengthening victims' rights legislation that will likely move through this very committee. And so part of why I am here today is to advocate to please take the partisanship out of this case. Please address the facts as you see them before you. Please join us in this investigation, and please help us hold these people accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate you sharing today. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Protecting survivors isn't partisan. Demanding the truth isn't partisan. And if institutions can't treat this case with honesty, then the entire system is broken. From the very beginning, she refuses to let anyone hide behind party lines or political rivalry. Because for her, this is simple. Powerful people were protected while victims were left to fend for themselves. And now, finally, Congress has the documents to prove just how deep that failure goes. As she lays out the scale of what the Oversight Committee received, the room shifts. Tens of thousands of documents, financial records, emails, correspondence, statements tied to individuals with global influence. Over 1,600 references to the current president. These aren't rumors whispered online. These aren't anonymous threads or late-night theories. These are files that were locked away out of public view until now. And she makes one thing painfully clear: these documents contain allegations, claims, sworn statements, assertions that demand a real investigation, not political spin, not selective outrage, not the convenient amnesia that seems to infect institutions every time someone wealthy or connected appears in the narrative. She stresses it again and again. These materials must be examined with a transparent lens. Nothing less. But what hits the hardest isn't the volume of documents, it's the pattern inside them. Stansbury brings forward materials tied to a case involving a then 16-year-old who alleged she was groomed at a private residence and abused by Epstein and others with significant global influence. She references communications where Epstein claims certain individuals knew what was happening, that minors were being recruited, that visits happened often, that photographs existed, that someone somewhere stayed silent when they should have spoken up. She quotes Epstein calling one figure the dog that hadn't barked, a phrase he used to describe someone who knew, yet said nothing to authorities. She doesn't present these as proven facts. She doesn't push them as verdicts. She presents them the way they appear in the documents: allegations, claims, statements, fragments of a story that should have been investigated years ago, but somehow never were. And in doing so, she forces the committee to confront a question they've avoided for too long. Why did the system look away? As she builds her case, she turns to the Justice Department's disturbing contradictions. Epstein himself, in documents recovered from his estate, noted he faced a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison. His own words, his own assessment. Yet federal prosecutors declined to bring charges under laws that would have triggered that sentence. Not because of lack of evidence. According to some documents, the evidence was there. Prosecutors on the ground reportedly recommended federal action. Survivors alleged they provided testimony. And still, the hammer never fell. This directly clashes with recent testimony from a U.S. attorney who insisted there wasn't enough credible evidence to pursue federal charges. Stansbury doesn't attack him personally. She simply lays out the contradiction and lets it sit, heavy and undeniable. Either Epstein misjudged his own exposure, or the Justice Department did. One of those can be explained, the other can't. And that's where she makes her most important point. If this case wasn't handled properly because of who might have been implicated, then this isn't just a failure, it's a scandal. A deep-rooted systemic failure designed to protect influence, reputation, and global power rather than vulnerable minors. She shifts the conversation to something deeper than names and documents. It's about institutional trust. When elite individuals get shielded, when evidence disappears, when prosecutors back down, the public sees exactly what survivors already knew. Justice doesn't always reach the top. Stansbury refuses to let that truth slide under the table. She demands the full unredacted Epstein files. Every page, every statement, every connection, because partial transparency is just another form of protection. Her voice never shakes, never wavers. She doesn't accuse. She exposes. She doesn't speculate. She cites. She doesn't play politics. She insists on facts. And she asks everyone in that room, Democrats, Republicans, every elected official, to finally stop choosing sides and start choosing accountability. Not because it's easy, because it's the only way to restore trust in a justice system that failed survivors over and over again. She outlines the core questions the committee must answer. Who were the powerful individuals connected to Epstein's crimes? Why did institutions fail to protect minors? Were people with influence shielded from scrutiny? And how do we deliver justice today, not years from now? These questions aren't rhetorical. They're a roadmap. And they strike at the heart of the entire scandal. But Stansbury goes even further. She brings the conversation back to survivors, the people whose lives were shattered while the system protected the wrong side. She reminds the committee that behind every file, every redaction, every missing charge, there is a person who waited years for justice. Some waited decades. Some never saw it at all. She calls out the secrecy, the sweetheart deals, the legal maneuvering that allowed Epstein to avoid consequences for so long, the institutions that failed again and again until those failures became impossible to ignore. She reminds everyone that healing requires truth, accountability, and reform. And none of that can happen until Congress is willing to look at every page without blinking. Her closing message is less a request and more a demand. Take the partisanship out of this case. No more excuses. No more selective outrage. No more hiding behind outdated narratives. Look at the facts. Read the documents. Follow the evidence. And for once, finally, stand with survivors instead of with power. The commentary that follows her statement says exactly what viewers feel. Stansbury did something Congress rarely does. She removed the theatrics and forced the country to confront the truth. She framed the scandal for what it is. A failure of institutions, not a failure of politics. She explained how survivors were ignored, how questions were avoided, how powerful individuals escaped scrutiny while the justice system acted more like a shield than a sword. And as the documents continue to surface, as investigators peel back decades of secrecy, the public must stay engaged. Because the people implicated, the networks of influence, the decisions made behind closed doors, none of that can stay hidden anymore. The truth doesn't vanish. It waits. And if Congress refuses to act, if the public stops demanding answers, then this story will slip into the same shadows that protected Epstein for so long. So if you believe that justice shouldn't depend on status, if you believe survivors deserve the full truth, if you believe institutions must be accountable, then don't look away. Stay informed, stay loud, and stay on the side of transparency. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown. Your support helps keep these stories in the light, where they belong.